Prints were all over the crime scene.
We haven't got a case, Roy.
Well, just make one. We'll order a psychiatrist to say she's a danger. Gotta make sure we get somebody good and tough.
Dr. Glass, this is Catherine. True now.
So is this where we're gonna do it?
Oh, so you're a writer. What do you write about?
Oh, the sexual, the violent, the basic instincts.
Sorry, you're not allowed to smoke in here.
You know what I like about you? You enjoy being in control. Like me.
I'm not the one who's on trial for murder.
Not yet. Do I make you uncomfortable?
Be careful, Michael. She's trying to seduce you.
Did you kill him?
If I said I didn't, would you believe me?
Everything that comes out of her mouth's a lie, even the truth's a lie.
What exactly do you want?
I wanted it from the first moment I saw you, and you did too. How do you picture it, Doctor?
I believe Miss Tramel's behavior is driven by what we might call a risk addiction.
I suspect the only limit for her would be her own death.
The judge let her go.
I'll make you a bet.
She'll do it again.
What are you doing here?
What you said about me being addicted to risk, isn't that what turns you on?
Don't play games with me.
What, you think I killed him?
Survival is the most basic instinct. Basic Instinct 2.
I feel like a cigarette.
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2006 thriller sequel, Basic Instinct 2. Now, before I get into sharing my thoughts on this sequel, I want to give a shout out to John for requesting this review, and let's get started. So, Basic Instinct 2 is a sequel that was in development hell for a long time. It even started production in 2000 or 2001, but then there was some issue with the budget or issue with what was going on with the plot or the cast, and the film was eventually shelved and production stopped. And if you ask me, it should have remained a unmade film because there's no reason for this. It's completely unnecessary. It's the poster child for a sequel that was not needed, and a sequel that in a lot of ways just exists purely as a vanity project for the film's star in Sharon Stone. And it's interesting that she even did it because she had strife with the producers, which is a big reason why the film didn't get made the first time around. The strife was so bad that she filed a lawsuit against them. And then for some reason, she wound up making a compromise, and they kissed and made up, and they did the movie anyway. And it's like, why? Maybe Sharon Stone at this point in her career, she thought this was going to be the film that was going to be a hit, and it was going to resurrect her career. I don't know. I don't know why she thought that, because this was not a good look for her. And I'm not saying that she's a bad looking gal by any means. She was still pretty hot for 41. But what I mean by this is not a good look for her is there's a lot of lines in this that are just embarrassing in terms of how TMI they are and just how forced they are in terms of trying to be edgy and risky and risque. It's just one of those things that's like, yeah, this was not gonna get you back into the spotlight. If anything, this was going to put you in the low light and essentially kill your career. And that's really what it wound up doing in the end. It took an ice pick and just stabbed it right in the heart. Now, the film is directed by Michael Caton-Jones, and he wasn't the original director that the producers had in mind. In fact, early on in the production, in the pre-production phase, Paul Verhoeven was considering doing it, but then he decided to pass and wanted to focus more on his return to his roots and make more Dutch films. So then they had to find somebody else. And against all odds, the producers managed to find David Cronenberg and get him to sign on. But because Mario Kassar was being such an idiot and would not allow Cronenberg to hire his own crew, Cronenberg left the film. You got David Cronenberg to agree to direct a sequel to Basic Instinct way late in the game, and because you didn't want to, I guess, put your ego aside for 1 second, you let him go? Like, what the fuck, Mario Kassar? Seriously. So Mario Kassar, being an idiot, being an egotistical dumbass, caused David Cronenberg to leave the project. So then they had to scramble to find a director. So they got Michael Caton-Jones. And Michael Caton-Jones in interviews has said that this was a miserable experience for him, one of the worst in his career. And honestly, you can't really tell because he's such a professional and his direction is so capable that ultimately it's an above average film when it comes to the directing. You don't really have a moment where Michael Caton-Jones's disdain for the project really comes through on the screen. And I gotta give him a lot of credit for that. I think he did a good job with what he was asked to do. It does suffer from a lot of similarities to thrillers from that era where they all look the same with the same kind of filtering and the same kind of cinematography and setup of shots, very cold and clinical. But he did have some moments with his direction that I thought was visually pleasing. So I feel that at the end of the day, I think it's an above average job of directing. The moments that really stand out are the ones where he steps outside of the popular box for the time period when it comes to the clinical, really safe kinds of shots. One in particular I really like is where he uses a really weird reflection of Michael Glass in one scene, and it's like it almost looks like he shot him walking in front of a wall of water, and I really like that shot. And there's other shots too, like the orgy scene, that are well shot and well done, and it's one of those films that visually it's not breathtaking by any means, but it's solid. It's not one of those films that is piss poor in terms of its direction. It's an adequate enough job for the most part. And maybe above average is maybe giving a little bit too much praise, but I give him a little bit of a boost considering that he didn't really have a lot of passion for this project. He didn't get along with Sharon Stone, and it was just one of those things where he could have easily just went through the motions and it could have been completely obvious, but that wasn't the case. He still put his nose to the grindstone and delivered a product that was pleasing to the eye and not too distracting. Now, the screenplay by Leora Barish and Henry Bean, that is where the film really falters the most. This script is dull. It's such a dull, generic script. The only times where it's not dull is when it's embarrassing and really cringe when it comes to its dialogue, and the times where it's trying to be sexy. I mean, the opening of the film is Catherine Trammell having this drugged guy who's in the passenger side of this car that she's driving around in and speeding down the road at like over 100 miles an hour. So she's speeding down the road, being risky, and she's taking this guy who's unconscious and having him finger her while she's driving the car. Yes, I'm not making this up. So she has this nearly unconscious guy, and she's grabbing his finger and she's shoving it in and out of her pussy while she's driving down the fucking road at over 100 miles an hour. This leads to them crashing and winding up in a river. She then escapes from the car and leaves the guy to drown, and that causes a situation where she's now under investigation, and that leads her to meeting the new love interest or foil for the film, for the franchise, in Michael Glass, who's a psychiatrist. And I'm just like, right from the beginning, you start off on a ridiculous, laughable note. I mean, come on now. And then you have lines of dialogue that are just as bad. I mean, did anyone really want to hear lines like this from Sharon Stone, where when she's asked by the detective Roy Washburn what was she doing at 100 miles per hour, and she's like, he was making me come, and it was 110. We must have hit a pothole. Kevin Franks died. You don't seem very worried. I'm devastated. I may never come again. You're like, oh my God. Like, what is this bullshit? This is sad. This is embarrassing. Why did you think this was something you had to do, Sharon? Really? Like, this, I mean, there are moments in Basic Instinct where she's very matter of fact and very blunt in terms of the dialogue, but not to this extent. And then it continues. There's other lines and other scenes where she's just talking to the psychiatrist and she's trying to turn him on and saying things like, you know, doctor, whenever I come, I think of your face. You know, you're just like, what the fuck? Can we just... I don't want to hear 41-year-old Sharon Stone continually talking about what makes her come. I'm sorry. I don't need that. It's not... I wouldn't even needed to have heard that with her character in her prime. Because it's just too much information. And it comes across as very tacky and forced. And then, like I said, it's a very dull script in other ways, because it's your typical, oh, there's a murder mystery, but kind of not. They're trying to do the same thing as the first film, but it's nowhere near as effective, where they're trying to be like, it's a mystery, but it's really not. We know who did it, but we're trying to mislead you and manipulate you and make you think that Catherine Trammell didn't do all of this, but of course she did. And the thing is, it doesn't work the second time around because you've already done it before, so it's nowhere near as fresh. Also, it doesn't work nearly as well because the male lead here is awful. And I find it hilarious that Sharon Stone blocked Benjamin Bratt from getting cast as the lead in this because he was a bad actor. Like, how is this Poundland Liam Neeson in David Morrissey any better than Benjamin Bratt? And this project just spelled doomed from the beginning, because you had the production that started and then had the stop, and then didn't start up again until years later. You had David Cronenberg, who left the project because one of the producers is being a dumbass. Then you had Robert Downey Jr., who was cast as the lead, but then he left and couldn't do it because of his drug addiction, and he was sent to jail. So it's one of those things where, okay, your star, rested, went to jail, The director left. Why? Just take the sign from God or whoever is up there, whatever the higher power is, and just don't make this movie. But nope, they ignored all the warning signs that did it anyway. And it was one of the biggest bombs of 2006. This cost $70 million. Where? This does not look like a $70 million movie. Is it because they flew and shot most of the scenes in the UK? Is that it? That's another thing about this film I don't think is really that effective. The UK setting does nothing for the movie. It doesn't help it. It doesn't enhance the atmosphere. It doesn't make it stand out. There's no reason why this had to take place in the UK. None whatsoever. It also hurts the film in some ways because you have a lot of these stuffy British characters who have sticks up their asses, and it really doesn't make for a really engaging dynamic between Sharon Stone and how risque she is and how risky her character is with these really stuck up snooty British guys and British gals. It just doesn't really click. And speaking of not really clicking, this whole plot, I don't give a fuck about anything. I don't care whether Catherine gets away with it all and screws everybody and mind fucks everybody to death. I don't give a fuck about any of that. I don't give a shit about the characters, especially not Michael Glass, because the way that this psychiatrist character is written early on and portrayed, he comes across as a prick. Why should I give a crap whether or not he gets ahead of the game and stays one step ahead of Catherine or helps the police officer bust her? And then also the police officer, he's painted as a dirty cop, so why the fuck should I care whether he nabs her either? Like, why should I care about anything? There's no reason for you to care about a single fucking thing in this plot. And there's body counts, there's people who die by being strangled or having their throats slits, and it doesn't really register because you do not care. It's a very thankless screenplay and a thankless film because you don't care about anything. And it's forgettable too because there's nothing really that memorable that's going on. The most memorable things about this are the cringe scenes where Sharon Stone is trying way too hard to be sexy. And the cast, I mean, other than Sharon Stone, no one really stands out. Especially David Morrissey, Poundland, Liam Neeson. Charlotte Rampling, she was there, I guess, as Dr. Melina Gardosh. David Thewlis, he was also there as Roy Washburn. I did appreciate the edge that his character had, even though he really wasn't that likable in the long run. He came across as really more of an asshole than anything else. And the rest of the cast is just not noteworthy and not even really worth mentioning. The music by John Murphy, repetitive, generic, bland. I really got tired of hearing the reused theme from Basic Instinct. He just beat that to death. There was a theme from Basic Instinct that was just reused over and over again in this film's score to the point where it reminded me of a bad video game where you just had one score, one piece of music on a loop over and over again, and it got really tiresome. The cinematography by Gula Pados, meh. The editing by Istvan Crawley and John Scott, I guess it was okay. It wasn't anything that was really particularly atrocious, but it wasn't anything that was really that great either. The best things about this film are really fleeting. It's a few moments and a few scenes here and there with Sharon Stone. And that's really about it. The moments where she successfully pulls off being a femme fatale. Those are the real highlights of this film. The rest are nothing but lowlights and nothing but complete forgettable blandness. It's one of those really basic films. What's funny is the first film, despite it being called Basic Instinct and having a pretty basic title, it was anything but basic. The sequel, on the other hand, basic as fuck. Just a total basic bitch. Anyway, I don't really know what else to say about Basic Instinct 2. There really isn't much to really say about it, because it really isn't much of a film to begin with. I do agree with Paul Verhoeven, who was interviewed at one point about this movie, and he said that one of the film's biggest problems is that it doesn't have a male lead who feels like he's on the same level as Sharon Stone. And he's absolutely 100% correct. And there isn't a single member of this cast that feels like they are on the same level as her. So you never feel like there is someone who is an equal, like there was with Michael Douglas in the first movie. So you don't have that chemistry, and you don't have that fire between the two leads. And as a result, it's just a really limp erotic thriller that doesn't get you up, doesn't get you going, and it doesn't thrill you either, because the thriller aspects of it are predictable and really unremarkable. So that's my review of Basic Instinct 2. Thanks for watching my review, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.